for tuning in to an episode of the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. Our good friend Alfredo Brown is on assignment today, but no worries. We've got Jagger May stepping in. Jagger, how you doing this morning?
Oh, fantastic. You got me into redraft mode early. I'm normally a Saturday, Sunday before I got to go on type guy, but now I'm ready. I feel like so prepared now. Like I'm ready to go on
There
this
you
week
go.
to lose half my leagues.
My week is so structured, and I'm sure yours is like very similar, but it's like
Yeah.
Monday and Tuesday, all I'm doing is rewatching games, kind of going through NFL Pro and PFF, looking at all the statistics. It's kind of Wednesday morning is when I turn that page and start looking forward at the next week, and that's when I start, really tightening up my rankings. This Thursday show is a nice kind of start to look forward to next week, but it's when I do the show Friday morning with Jeff Bell. That's when I feel super plugged in for the upcoming slate. We go through matchup by matchup. We talk about all the injuries, all that good stuff. But everybody's got their schedule, and we are at that point in the week now, Thursday, where we start looking ahead at upcoming matchups. So don't want to bury the lead anymore. Today we're going to talk about players that you want to start in week 12. And then after we get through some of our favorite starts of the week, we're going to answer some listener questions that we got in via email, Twitter, and Blue Sky. So Jagger, go ahead and start us off. Who is a guy this week that you are above consensus on, somebody that you are looking at as a good start in week 12?
I'm firing up Brian Robinson Jr. I'm grossly high in my rankings of him against DCR. And we talked a little bit about this pre-show. Not a lot of thought in this. Dallas, real bad. Brian Robinson, real good. Jaden Daniels, ribs hurt, can't run. That's
There you
that's
go.
literally my reasoning right there. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, and sometimes it does help to kind of take a more simplistic view on stuff like this. I don't know if you saw, Jagger, I do my 3 up, 3 down article, and I talked about Quentin Johnston, who we're not going to talk about on this show, but a guy that I'd fire up as a wide receiver 3. And I said, we get like, I wrote this big long thing kind of talking about all the issues with Quentin Johnston. Like, he's not the most nuanced route runner. He struggles with ball skills. He's not great at contested catches. But at the end of the day, he is playing that role as the big play option for a
Yep.
quarterback who likes to make big plays happen. Sometimes you can just boil it down and make it simple. Good player going up against a bad defense. Sometimes it really is that simple. So let's put an actionable spin on this. I don't know if you got your rankings in front of you right now. I am also very high on Brian Robinson this week. I've got him as my RB 13. I've got him ahead of Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones. Where do you have him ranked, Jagger?
I have him as RB9 this
Yeah,
week.
so even higher than I. So I'm guessing you
Yeah,
got
I
him
was about
ahead of
to say,
Tyrone Tracy, ahead
yeah,
of James Conner and Josh Jacobs, maybe.
yeah. Exactly. Like I know everyone says it's just the ribs for Jaden Daniels, but I also think that Brian Robinson Jr. has been like a really good engine in this offense, and not having him has affected the offense as a whole, as well as not just having a healthy QB. So I'm not saying that the correlation is causation, but I don't think it helps.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Robinson, you got a player like that can just wear defenses down. We saw him doing that early in the season. We saw him doing it last year. I think he surprised a lot of people. He was an older prospect that didn't have a ton of work in college, and there were reasons people were finding to fade him. But man, he's looked great since coming into the league. And yeah, firing him up as an RB1 this week. Last question I'll ask you before we talk about my running back start of the week. Are you putting any weight into the Cliff Kingsbury is a first half of the season mirage? You look at what he did during his time in Arizona. He was regularly, Kyler Murray putting up QB1 finishes week after week, winning games. And then it seems like every year around the midway point of the season, Cliff Kingsbury and his offense just turned into a pumpkin. So, of course, we've got the Jaden Daniels injury. He's had some tough opponents over the last few weeks as well, but it's starting to feel vaguely reminiscent like his time in Arizona. Is that something you're worried about it all, or you think that's just kind of fluky?
I think I was worried about it week 1. I was worried
Yeah,
about it when
like,
they
this isn't Cliff
hired.
Kingsbury.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, ugh, I mean, I will say that I don't think there's a whole lot of merit right now, because there's other outliers. Like you said, Brian Robinson's been out, Jane Daniels been hurt. Let's be honest, that offense doesn't have a lot of talent on there. It really has been Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin just
Right.
making it happen with a lot of adversity around them. So I will give him that benefit of the doubt. But Cliff Kingsbury's always kind of been this guy. So yes, my answer to you is yes. I do take stock into it.
Well, let's go ahead and before we talk about my start of the week, I want to remind you that if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to give us a thumbs up. That's going to help some other people in the audience find us. If you've got anything that you'd like to add or any start sit questions you'd like to ask us, feel free to ask in the comments below. And if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, what we would really, really like is if you can leave a review. That is going to help us more than a like on YouTube, more than anything else. If you can leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, letting us know what you think about the show, what we can improve, whatever it may be, it does mean a lot to us. Let's go ahead and talk about my start of the week. Rachaad White is a guy that I was fading pretty hard this offseason. And, now it seems like everybody is fading Rachaad White. You look in consensus rankings, and he's typically at that RB2, RB3 bubble. And I do like this matchup against the Giants. The Giants have a better than expected defense, but they are 7th in rushing yards allowed to running backs and 11th in receiving yards allowed to running backs. Now, a lot of people have seen Bucky Irving carving out a bigger role, and we did talk about this just a few days ago, Jagger, when we did our running back stashes. I talked about Rachaad White as a guy that you can go out and trade for because he has a good upcoming schedule. But really, I think the whole Bucky Irving thing has just been overblown. Bucky Irving has taken away a lot of those low-calorie touches. He's getting in between the tackles touches, and he makes the flashy plays here and there. But the targets, which are worth 2.5 times as much as a carry, are still going to Rachaad White. The red zone touches where he's able to score touchdowns, still going to Rachaad White. So even though we're seeing that workload get reeled back a little bit, he still has a stranglehold on the high value touches here. And that's what we want in fantasy. So Rachaad White this week, like I said, a lot of people are ranking him kind of at that RB2, RB3 bubble. I have a little bit more faith in him. I've got him as my RB19 on the week, so starting him ahead of J.K. Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard, Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, very much in play as an RB2 with a high ceiling in this matchup.
I agree 1,000%. You said all the words that I tell people on the Start Sit show right here on this channel, where I was like, yeah, Bucky Irving's there. And Bucky Irving is a boom bust flex play because, like you said, he doesn't get the high leverage touches that Rachaad White does. Like, well, Rachaad White averages -2 yards per carry, but he gets like 10 targets a game. And I'm fine with that, especially since Tampa Bay has a lot. Well, Mike Evans is coming back, but Chris Godwin is out. Jalen McMillan, he hasn't really done it. Trey Palmer, where is he? When is he going to wake up angry again?
Yeah, it's been a while. We could use that. And last year, Rachaad White is not a great rusher. We know that. I mean, last year he was dead last among all running backs in EPA. I mean, this guy was literally a liability when he was touching the ball in between the tackles. So then they bring in a guy like Bucky Irving who can spell him on those touches. And then that just keeps Rachaad White fresh for the big plays in the passing game. And we've seen that over the last few weeks where he's able to take these little dink and dunk passes and then rip off 30, 40 yards after the catch, score a touchdown. So, a lot of people are starting to sour on Rachaad White. I'm still steadfast in my belief that he's going to be a good high-end RB2. Let's talk about some wide receivers here. And Jagger, you've got a name that I am loving this week. Talk to us a little bit about Ladd McConkey going up against Baltimore.
Ladd McConkey has really torn it up. Justin Herbert as well. This is why you drafted Ladd McConkey. Some might say aggressively, but this is what rookies do. I know I've talked about this with you. I've talked about this with Jeff. Like rookies normally take a little bit to get rolling, guys. And now if you look at I know reception perception just came out on him. He's crushing every route. Like it's all green there. And he's basically the only target who can create for himself. Now, Quentin Johnston is someone who has taken a step forward, but Ladd McConkey has been the guy and the target. Now, when you look at the other side of the ball of Baltimore, a lot of the reason Baltimore hasn't been winning is not because Lamar Jackson can't win games, is that defense just can't cover anybody. They have Roquan Smith covering little slot guys out there. So I definitely think that this is the game, and this is going to be a shootout, or as much as a shootout as a Harbaugh will allow, as the Harbaugh, I guess, will allow here. But I expect Ladd McConkey to not just lead the team in targets. I probably expect him to lead the game on both sides of the ball, even ahead of someone like Zay Flowers.
Yeah, and Ladd McConkey is the clear wide receiver one in this offense. Quentin Johnson is right
Not
there
even
in fantasy
close.
points per game. Right, yeah, and Quentin Johnson is scoring the touchdown, and he makes the big plays, and that's why on a point per game basis, he and Ladd McConkey are giving you similar production in fantasy. But right now, Ladd McConkey is 63 targets to Quentin Johnson's 37. I mean, he's almost twice as involved. We've seen some unlucky touchdown rates for Lad McConkey so far, but the usage has been there. And, I do like, we talked about Quentin Johnson a little bit earlier. I said I like him as a wide receiver 3 this week. I like Lad McConkey as a high end wide receiver too. I mean, he just seems to get better every single week. Matt Waldman wrote a really good article this offseason about how Lad McConkey and his play style is just a perfect match for what Justin Herbert likes to do. And we're seeing that transpire right now. So, again, as we always like to do here, trying to put an actionable spin on it for the audience. I've got Lad McConkey as my wide receiver 24 this week. I had a Tank Dell, I had a Josh Downs, I had a Quentin Johnson, who I mentioned, Jacoby Myers, DeAndre Hopkins, Cedric Tillman, Roma Dunze. I mean, I can keep going and going and going, but I've got Lad McConkey ahead of a lot of people that you're probably thinking about as a must-start player. But Lad McConkey, I can't think of a single league where I'm in any position where I can bench him.
I know I have him at, again, I'm grossly high on him. He's my wide receiver 14 right now. Like I said, I have him ahead of Zay Flowers, Debo
Yeah,
Samuel, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, I'm going to scoot up just a little bit, but in that matchup there. But I just, especially right now, I know when you hear wide receiver 14, there's 6 teams on buys, guys. It's
right.
real easy for some of these guys to get pushed up, and that's a lot of that. But I also just like the matchup better. Like Zay Flowers, I think he's explosive, but they have other options in Baltimore where they can move away from. And the Chargers have just been a really solid defense. I mean, there's never been a bad Jim Harbaugh defense ever. So
And you mentioned 6 teams on bye. This isn't just any 6 teams. I mean,
yeah,
let's talk about some of the wide receivers that are on bye this week. We've got Drake London, Darnell
yeah.
Mooney, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Amari Cooper, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Brian Thomas Jr., all guys that we probably have ahead or near guys like Lad McConkey and the guy that I'm going to talk about next. But, with a lot of really good receivers on bye this week, a lot of these guys that were kind of at that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 bubble are now in must start territory.
Yep.
That leads me to the guy that I'm going to talk about next, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And I know there were really high hopes for him coming into the league, and he hasn't lived up to them so far, but we are starting to see him get more and more involved on a weekly basis. He has 24 targets in his last 2 games. And one of those games came last week with 11 targets with DK Metcalf back on the field. So there was some concern that his explosion 2 weeks ago was only because DK Metcalf wasn't there. Well, DK Metcalf was back, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba still maintained an elite target share. And we're starting to see better usage. Last year and at the beginning of this year, we saw him almost like in a Wan'Dale Robinson type of role where he's just running near the line of scrimmage and they're getting the ball to him in the flat. Now he's getting these big boy targets deep downfield, and he is taking advantage of them. So we know that this guy is a great prospect. Hasn't really panned out so far, but based on what we've seen over the last 2 weeks, the change in usage, the change of getting him more downfield, it seems like now we might finally see that ceiling that we had hoped for before he was drafted coming to fruition. And then you look at this matchup against Arizona, they have just been a pass funnel. This game has a huge over-under projected for the week, so we're expecting a lot of points here. And Jaxon Smith-Njigba, if this gets to a game where it's a shootout and they're both throwing, he seems to be the wide receiver 1 right now. DK Metcalf, of course, has the higher ceiling because of his big playability, but Jaxon Smith-Njigba is the guy pulling the targets right now. So I actually have him ahead of Lad McConkey, the guy that you just talked about, but not too far, just a few guys in between them. But ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr., Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed. I mean, he is inside my top 20 this week. Where do you land on Jaxon Smith-Njigba? It sounded like you had him just a few spots behind Lad
Yeah.
McConkey, right?
Wide receiver 17. Like the only people I have ahead of him between that and Lad McConkey are Zay Flowers, Devontae Smith. And
Yeah, I'm
those are,
wondering because it seems like we got a lot of people here. I'm wondering the guys that I've really forced up high in my rankings that I'm not talking about today. I've got Cortland Sutton, Juwan Jennings, Malik Neighbors. I have those guys inside the JSN McConkey tier. Where do you land on those 3 kind of random guys that I'm throwing out there? Malik Neighbors, Juwan Jennings, Cortland Sutton. Do you have those guys ahead or behind McConkey and JSN?
I have Malik Neighbors ahead of and I've literally switched Malik Neighbors up 4 spots because
Dude,
it's
I
like
have
it's
no
Malik
idea.
Neighbors. Yeah, it's Malik
Right.
Neighbors against Tampa Bay, but
But
Tommy
it's Tommy
DeVito.
DeVito. Yeah.
So it's like that's one where I am like struggling with. So ask me Sunday morning when I'm forced to submit, hit submit for that. But like some of these other guys, Cortland Sutton, he's right behind Jaxon Smith-Njigba, because me and Jeff have been saying on the Dynasty show that Cortland Sutton is like the wide receiver 50 in Dynasty. We're like, he's not bad. He's just been a Bronco.
And I
And then
think he's
Bo
still
Nix
only
is,
28. Like he's not
yeah, he's not
super
that old.
old. Yeah, it took
Yeah.
took some time off with a knee injury too. Like he's a young 28 and he looks really good. Wide receiver 4 over the last month of the season.
Yeah.
Like he's been balling out.
And now he has Vegas. So it's
Right.
really this tier. To be honest, I'm just juggling players. I'm like, oh, that's
Right.
shiny right now. You know?
And that's why I wanted to mention them because those are all guys that I think if you
Yeah.
told us in the preseason that we'd be talking about JSN, Lad McConkey, Juwan Jennings, and some of these other guys as must start players, but that's where we are. Before we move off of wide receivers and talk about the tight ends we want to start, I do want to talk about Juwan Jennings for a quick second. And I know this show's bouncing all over the place, and I apologize to the viewers, but Jagger and I, we're going to go off on tangents. That's what we do here. Let's
Yeah.
talk about Juwan Jennings for a second, because I think neither of us talked about him as a must-start player, but based on where we have him ranked, it sounds like we both kind of look at Juwan Jennings as a must-start player. My boiled down kind of one sentence take on Juwan Jennings is that he looks better in the Brandon Ayuk role than Brandon Ayuk looked. I don't know what you think about that, Jagger.
I mean, it's true. And then this is not saying that Ayuk sucks or anything, but me and Jeff talked about this. People who don't practice don't play well. That's just at the end of the day, that's what
Mhm.
happened. Juwan Jennings has been out in the field every time and he looks great. It's like I got a trade offer for him. And someone's like, well, are you going to get rid of Juwan Jennings? I'm like, I'm 8-2. I don't think I can get rid of a dude like Juwan Jennings right
Like he's
now.
top 12 down the stretch, realistically.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, he's on a 49ers offense where it's just like, if you have Debo, George Kittle, or any of these guys, you're putting them in your lineup and you're hoping it's that week for them. That's like these high variance players, and you need to accept that. Embrace the variance, because Juwan Jennings is going to get you, maybe 4 or 5 points, or he can get you 28 depending on what kind of day or Brock Purdy's having. I know everyone says that, well, the 49ers have been figured out, but I think, Kyle Shanahan's a smart enough dude where I think he can cook up something.
I doubt you're super plugged into Bears Twitter, Jagger, but the talking point on Bears Twitter yesterday is, should the Chicago Bears hire Kyle Shanahan after the 49ers fire him after this season? And in case you wonder how delusional the Chicago fan base is right now, that's what they're hoping for, is a
We're there.
Kyle Shanahan next year. Yeah,
Mm.
that's where we are. Let's go ahead and move on to tight ends. And again, we like to focus on wide receivers and wide receivers and running backs for the most part when we do this Thursday episode. But again, you look at the players that are on bye this week, the tight ends. No Kyle Pitts, no Dawson Knox, no Dalton Kincaid, no Mike Gesicki, no Taysom Hill, no Tyler Conklin, no Evan Ingram. So there are a lot of people reaching into their waiver wire this week looking for somebody they can pick up and plug into their lineup. Who's a guy that you'd recommend, Jagger?
Mine's Hunter Henry, and I've been on the Start Sit show telling everyone to stop asking me about Hunter Henry, because, like, depending on who your tight end is, I think he's a must start every week at this point. Drake May looks like the real deal. He's playing like the real deal. The problem is they don't have any wide receivers. So Hunter Henry is the one guy who is eating targets. And then when you look at the Dolphins and what they've done this season, particularly the last 4 games, I think they're number 4 with fantasy points allowed to tight ends right now. So especially with a game like this, that's a divisional game, and Drake May's been cooking it up. I want his number 1 target. It's not Jalen Polk. It's sometimes Pop Douglas, but most of the time it's Hunter Henry.
Yeah, Hunter Henry is kind of the wide receiver 1 there. And, I
Yep.
am not the tight end whisperer, so I will defer to our friend Andrew Cooper, who is the tight end whisperer. And he says time and time again, if you want to be an elite tight end, you need to be a top 2 target on your team. And right
Yep.
now, Hunter Henry is arguably the top 1 target on his team. Yeah, we're getting a little bit allured by Kayshon Boutte and his consistent 6 targets per game every single week. And Kendrick Bourne came in last week and looked good when he returned. But Hunter Henry, for all intents and purposes, is the wide receiver 1 here. So I like that call out as well. Again, trying to put an actionable spin on it like we try to do. Where do you have him ranked? I've got him as my tight end 11 on the week, Jagger. Is that about where you've got him, or are you a little bit higher than that?
I guess I'm aggressively high because I have him at tight end 6, and I've moved. I guess I should have put Sam Laporta on here because, like, I feel like it's Sam Laporta week going against the Colts. I mean, they're kind of in that same 49ers situation, but I have both of those guys 6 and 7. Will Dissly against Baltimore. I just don't think Will Dissly has the upside as a lot of these guys do. David Njoku, I've faded a lot because Pittsburgh's a tough defense to go against. Jonnu Smith is just I'm actually moving him up right now, physically moving him up. But again, like Mark Andrews, I have faded. TJ Hawkinson, I'm fading going against the Bears. A lot of these other guys that would normally be a lot higher just don't have the matchups that I think like Hunter Henry has. So
Yeah. And like you said, with all the guys on bye, I mean, a lot of these guys, Kyle Pitts and Taysom Hill maybe, are guys that we'd be putting in ahead of Hunter Henry. But with all these guys on bye, no Evan Ingram as well. All of a sudden, these guys that were kind of in the tight end 12, tight end 15 range, it's like, how the hell did they end up by tight end 6 this week? Well,
yeah.
there's a lot of good guys on bye. And I'm going to talk about Jonnu Smith, the guy that you had just mentioned. He's my tight end 7 on the week. Like you said, I might be aggressively high with this ranking, but I've loved what I've seen over the last few weeks. We saw before Tua returned, we saw Jonnu getting more involved in the offense. And my fear was that, this is just a guy who can do things after the catch. They're just trying to make it easier for whoever the backup quarterback was at that time and just, getting these check down passes into Jonnu Smith's hands. But then Tua Tagovailoa returned, and Jonnu Smith maintained the same usage. You look over his last 6 weeks. That's when he has started to kind of pick up steam in this offense. He's seen 6+ targets in 5 of the last 6 weeks. And if you look over those 6 weeks on a per game basis, he is the tight end 6 in fantasy scoring, averaging 14.8 points per game over the last 6 weeks. I mean, he is averaging more points than Trey McBride, Taysom Hill, Evan Ingram, Zach Ertz, Kyle Pitts. And a lot of that comes on the back of a 2-touchdown performance last week. But, we look at this offense. Devon Achane has been way more involved in the passing game than we expected. So has Jonnu Smith. And this is coming at the expense of Jalen Waddle, who is basically the team's wide receiver 4 now. You've got Tyreek Hill getting the majority of the targets. You got Devon Achane, then you get Jonnu Smith, and then Jalen Waddle is just hoping for whatever scraps fall to him after those 3 eat. So right now, Jonnu Smith, in this kind of bipocalypse that we're dealing with in week 12, sneaks inside my top 10 and, falls into must-start territory.
Yep, I agree 100%. And it's like you said, if you really spell it out, it's sad what's happened to Jalen Waddle. He's like when it comes to the receivers and tight ends, he's a kid drowning in the pool while like Mike McDaniel holds up Johnny Smith.
The skeleton in the chair at the bottom of the pool.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
said, he's even past that. He's a skeleton.
And it's tough, man. Jalen Waddle was a guy that I really was touting pretty heavily this preseason, and I feel like normally when talented players are struggling, I'm able to find the reason why. I can add some context to it. Like Tank Dell, his early season struggles, yeah, it made sense. We probably overlooked the fact that he got shot through his leg and was recovering from surgery, and that's probably why it took Tank Dell some time to get up to speed. Mark Andrews, he had the preseason car injury or car accident that kind of bled into his early season struggles. With Jalen Waddle, I don't know what it is. Like we still see the burst every now and then. Like he'll catch a ball and he'll hit the burners, and it's like, wow, Jalen Waddle is still the same fast guy that he was drafted to be, but the usage hasn't been there. And again, I'm kind of throwing my hands up in the air. I don't know what is going on with Jalen Waddle, and I've seen a lot of smart people discuss what's going on with Jalen Waddle, and everybody's just kind of like, I don't know. Maybe there's an undisclosed injury. There's something going on because he just is not the player that they paid him to be this offseason.
I know he's one where I've like put a pin in, like when I have time to look at NFL film, I'm like, like what, like, does he look hurt? Cause like I've seen him play well for several years now. I don't know. It's not like he's old, is he washed already? So
I mean, I've made the joke a few times on the show, but the fastest he's looked so far this season was when he took that one carry for a 25-yard loss. You know what I'm talking about at the end of the game where he tried
oh
turning it
yeah. Yeah.
downfield and turning around. That's the quickest he's looked all season, running for his life backwards from a linebacker. But let's go ahead and get into the start sit questions here. And Jagger, we got a bunch of them. So get your rankings pulled up and we'll try to go through these as quickly as possible. First question comes in from Mike Quensell on Twitter as the Fantasy Meatball. He says, thank you, football guys in PPR. Jacoby Myers, Keenan Allen, or Quentin Johnston in the flex. I think Keenan Allen is the obvious guy for me that kind of falls out of this equation. So for me, it's down to Jacoby Myers or Quentin Johnston. But Jagger, curious to see who you go with here.
Jacoby Myers is the floor play because he's the second fiddle to Brock Bowers, which isn't a bad thing. Jacoby Myers earns targets. It's not like he's a jag out there. He's always been someone who's earned targets. Quentin Johnston's clear the ceiling. You just can't depend on him
Right.
because I was it Jeff that says that like 450% of Quentin Johnston's yards have come from busted coverage.
I mean,
So
they have, yeah,
yeah,
it
I mean
makes sense.
it's really bad.
But I do want to say, a lot of ado has been made about the busted coverage touchdowns. The touchdown that he had last week, and this is what I wrote about in my 3 up, 3 down article. A lot of people look at that and they say that it's busted coverage. And that's one way to look at it for sure. But I think there's, multiple views on every play. And my view on that play is that sure, the coverage might have been busted, but at the same time, the window that Justin Herbert had to squeeze that ball into, I think Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are the only other quarterbacks in the league that are making that throw. So, like, yeah, it was technically busted coverage, but Quentin Johnston was open for the blink of an eye, 40 yards downfield, and Justin Herbert was able to squeeze it in between 3 defenders and put it right on Quentin Johnston. So, well, yeah, maybe it was busted coverage. He also benefits from having one of the few quarterbacks on the planet that could actually make that throw. So, I'm going with Quentin Johnston here, and they're close. They are back to back in my rankings. You're obviously looking at much more variance with a guy like Quentin Johnston, but what worries me a little bit is that matchup, Jacoby Myers. He's going to be
I
pulling
was about to
coverage from
say
Pat
He
Surtain.
might get Pat Surtain. Like I actually was just looking at that, and I'm like, well, Dave, you're selling me on there. So
Yeah,
on
so
QJ, I'm sad Jeff's not here because he's been trying to get me to be pro QJ for like 2 years.
well, I will go ahead and send him this clip later today. And really that's what it comes down to. I think like in a vacuum, rest of the season, I'd prefer Jacoby Myers to Quentin Johnston. But in this matchup with Pat Surtain, I'm going to lean towards Quentin Johnston. On to the next question. Jack Lucene, I believe is how you say this one. He said, DJ Moore dilemma. What is the bar for DJ Moore? He's saying DJ Moore or Tyrone Tracy, DJ Moore or Jerry Judy, DJ Moore or Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore or Quentin Johnston. I'll spoil this one. I have all of those guys ranked ahead of DJ Moore this week. I don't know about you, Jagger.
Mine is Calvin Ridley is the bar, but like Tyrone Tracy and Jerry Judy, and then Calvin. Like so, excuse me. Like I guess Quentin Johnston's a bar. That's where I would stop right there. But you're the Bears fan, man. What's going on there? Why am I wrong about DJ Moore this year? I was right last year. What's going on
Uh,
this year?
I was very much so right on DJ Moore last year, and he's a good player. I don't know. I always feel uncomfortable talking about things like this because I don't want to pretend to like know the player on a personal level or get inside the psychology or inside DJ Moore's head or anything like that. But he just looks disengaged this year, and it's as simple as that. And you look back this offseason when all of the debates were going around. What are the Bears going to do? Are they going to move forward with Justin Fields? Are they going to draft Caleb Williams? Are they going to trade out of the pick? DJ Moore was very outspoken about his desire to keep Justin Fields. And he said, go watch the tape. Justin Fields is a great quarterback. Look at the things that he has done for us. I think there's a little bit of distaste that they kind of shipped Justin Fields out of town and restarted. And we've seen it, DJ Moore giving up on plays. And that's the one that got super viral and, everybody was talking about. But even for the weeks leading up to that, he was regularly giving up on routes, just not playing with the tenacity that he has in the past. I don't know if it's he's mad at Justin Fields is gone. I don't know if it's that he just hated Shane Waldron. I don't know if it's that he got paid and just
Yeah,
lost some of his tenacity, but he has not looked like the same player this year that he did last year. He's getting right now. Roma Dunze has more receiving yards than DJ Moore does. I mean, it's not good. So DJ Moore is even with all the buys this week. I've got him outside of my top 30.
that's crazy. All right. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, like you said, you watch every game, so
I did not want to be there with DJ Moore. Trust me. I mean, I love the guy. Even before he ever came to Chicago, I was a huge DJ Moore fan, but he just hasn't been playing great. And the ceiling's always there. He could always have a 10 catch, 200-yard game. That's certainly in his range of outcomes. But we've seen a lot more of the downside than we've seen of the upside so far this year.
yep.
Next question comes from Jacob Blackburn on Twitter, and he's saying, "Love the show, guys. Put me out of my misery. Now that Jalen McMillan is healthy and should be a top 2 option, um, counting Cade Otton in half PPR, are we going with Jalen McMillan or Jalen Waddle? It is dark days for us Jalen Waddle owners. It certainly is. Didn't think we'd be talking about Jalen McMillan or Jalen Waddle as a start-sit question. And
It's
in the
real though.
offseason,
Like
if I knew we'd be having this, I'd just say, wow, well, Jalen McMillan must be having a hell of a year. Not that Jalen Waddle was playing this badly. Who are you going here, Jagger?
I lean Jalen Waddle for the simple fact that he's done it in the NFL before. The Jalen McMillan thing, we are wish casting a lot, and we love. I mean, he was on the field for 80% of the snaps for like 6 weeks in a row and did nothing. That's alarming when you think about the yards per route run. That's like Jahan Dotson status. So Jalen Waddle's at least produced points before.
Yeah, I've got Waddle at wide receiver 36 and Jalen McMillan at wide receiver 49. Maybe I'm a fool for just still keeping Waddle inside my top 36, but like you said, we've seen it before. Like, again, like kind of head scratching. I don't know what's going on with Jalen Waddle. If you look just at Jalen Waddle's raw numbers this year, we'd probably be ranking him outside of the top 60. But,
Yep.
we know the pedigree, we know the history, and I think we're still holding on to hope a little bit. I'm going Jalen Waddle over Jalen McMillan, but Jacob, I empathize and I sympathize with you. I know it's a tough spot to be in right now. Next question comes from IDP Jake, which love this username on Twitter at Late Round DB.
Yeah.
Hat tip to our good friend JJ Zacharyson. He says in half point PPR, are we starting David Njoku tonight versus the Steelers or Will Dissly Monday night versus the Ravens? And I think it's important to mention the potential weather tonight. Jagger, I'm sure you've seen this. They're talking about sneet and sleet and skeet, and I don't even know what else, all sorts of crazy precipitation coming down during this game tonight. So a lot of people are worried that this is going to be a run heavy defensive slugfest because of the weather and the rain. But between these two, between David Njoku and Will Dissly, I think I know who you're going with, but well, let's hear it.
I think I'm gonna go Will Dissly. Is that who you thought I was gonna say, or you think I was going to Njoku?
I thought you were going to go into Njoku because it sounded like you were a little bit lower on Dissly on a conversation we had earlier. I've got Njoku ahead of Dissly. My tight end 5 and my tight end 8, so they're really, really, really close. I'm going to lead Njoku though. Just it's close for me. I'm scared off by the weather a little bit, but I also think that weather could work for a guy like David Njoku. He gets so many of his targets in the short parts of the field. And then if you're dealing with a wet, sloppy field, that tells me that all he needs to do is break one tackle and then he's off to the races. So I can see a potential blow up spot here for David Njoku, even with the weather.
See, they're close for me. Like when you said that, I'm like, yeah, that's where I'm at. And it was the weather that flipped it for me. Like it wasn't like, yes, pound the table for Dissly. It's more like Dissly. So with that in mind, like Njoku actually has upside. I'll stick by what I said about Dissly being the floor play.
Yeah, and the Dissly, I think Dissly is a good floor play. The usage has been very impressive, and he finally found the end zone last week. I don't think anybody thought Dissly would be seeing as many targets as he is in this offense, but it's there, and I think that's what it comes down to. I think you're getting a slightly safer floor with Dissly, but Dissly's not going to erupt for a 30-plus point game, and that's what you can get from David Njoku. So I think this question is more about risk tolerance than anything else. If you want the high range of outcomes, go with David Njoku. If you're looking for something a little bit safer, I think you get that with Will Dissly. Next question comes from Eric Schlukber, I believe. Schlukber? I hope I got that right. Need 2 out of these 3. JMO, which I assume is Jameson Williams, Jaden Reed, or Isaiah Pacheco. I'm surprised this is the first Isaiah Pacheco question that we got so far, Jagger. I know a lot of people are hopeful that he'll come back this week. Before we even get into this question, do you kind of have a take on Isaiah Pacheco, what to expect this week?
I don't really want to. I just think that I think the Chiefs backfield gets grosser and grosser for fantasy basically every week because I feel like they just add a new body that looks pretty good. I mean, like the Carson Steele stuff's done, but Kareem Hunt looks fine. I think he looks fine. Samaje Perine looks fine. So I think this might become maybe our 1 or 2-headed monster, but I'm not ready to put Pacheco in my lineup till I know that he is back and healthy. So it's easy JMO and Reed for me.
That's exactly where I am. And I think so many people have just been looking at Isaiah Pacheco on their IR spot for the last 2 months and are just like frothing to get him back in the lineup. But I think I need to see it first. I mean, this is a serious injury that he came back from. And this is an injury that we saw, Tony Pollard suffered this injury 2 years ago. and then had an entire offseason to heal. And then it still took him half the year to get up to football speed. I mean, this isn't something where he's just going to be healthy and back to 100%. I think there's going to be a little bit of a ramp up period. And I actually just talked with Adam Hutchison about this yesterday, our injury expert over at Football Guys. And he said he's also expecting some sort of a ramp up period. So it's not like they've been getting terrible running back play. Kareem Hunt's been very good. So I think that this week, if Pacheco is active, I'd guess that we see something like an 80-20 or 70-30 split in favor of Kareem Hunt. And then I think those sliders keep moving over the next few weeks until we get maybe a 60-40 split with Pacheco as the lead back, as we get closer to the playoffs. But as far as fantasy goes, I hate the situation for Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I just don't want any part of it whatsoever, and I don't see me wanting a part of it anytime soon.
So now to answer Eric's question, and I think we're going to be in agreement here, Jameson Williams, Jaden Reed, Isaiah Pacheco, you got to bench one. We're benching Pacheco, right?
Yeah. Like
right,
honestly, this is one of
right
those cases where cool, you ranked them for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be recommending that a lot of people bench Isaiah Pacheco this week, so hopefully that one doesn't blow up in my face. Next question comes from Andrea Styslowski, and she says, good morning, Josh Downs or Ladd McConkey in PPR, and then Jonnu Smith, Zach Ertz, or Mark Andrews, also in PPR. I do like Josh Downs. He's put together a couple of good weeks with Anthony Richardson, but I'm going Ladd McConkey over Josh Downs. What about you?
Same.
And then for the tight end spot, this is I think a lot of people are posed with similar situations. She might be looking at the waiver wire right now for Jonnu Smith and Zach Ertz. Between Jonnu Smith, Zach Ertz, and Mark Andrews, who do you prefer?
Staying on brand. I mean, going with Jonnu here. So I intentionally faded Mark Andrews this week. Not even because it's Mark Andrews, it's because it's the Chargers.
Yeah, I've actually got Zach Ertz ahead of Mark Andrews. Is that crazy? I mean, the usage
maybe
has been there for Zach Ertz. I got Jonnu Smith is my tight end 7. Zach Ertz is my tight end 10, and Mark Andrews is my tight end 11. So I'm going Jonnu out of the bunch, and for weirdly enough, prefer Zach Ertz to Andrews this week. Next question comes in from Letitia Spiller on Twitter, and she says, I'm in a pinch. Jonathan Brooks versus Kansas City or Isaiah Pacheco versus Carolina. Oh my God, that's a tough one to answer.
Pick
really
the guys.
Tough one to answer.
I would.
I know what my gut is telling me right now. I'm going to see
Pacheco?
if my rankings reflect it.
Is your gut saying Pacheco?
My gut's saying Jonathan Brooks. He's over a year removed from this ACL now, and I think that they are slow rolling it. But I just can't ignore the possibility that Jonathan Brooks comes out there and just takes one touch 70 yards to the house. And maybe that's just me wish casting this, but I don't think Pacheco has that type of upside. I think Pacheco is going to be slow and, getting ramped up still and not seeing a full workload. I think Jonathan Brooks is also going to be getting ramped up to a larger workload, but I think that him being, over a year removed from his injury, Isaiah Pacheco still being pretty, 2 months removed from a major surgery on his leg. They're both probably projecting for similar workloads. I'll roll the dice on a guy who's got the athleticism in his favor.
Well, thank you. I was reeling myself in because I'm like, I'm gonna roll out Brooks. Like, personally, I'm putting Brooks in lineups here, but like,
I've got him in way more than I'm comfortable with. I've got
Yeah.
Jonathan Brooks in my RB1 slot in a handful of leagues this week.
Oh man,
just to send a message to the rest of the team. Probably should be a flex, but I'm putting him in that RB1 spot.
Yeah, rally the other guys.
So we're going Jonathan Brooks ahead of Pacheco.
Yep.
All right, man. That's where I am too. Good luck, Letitia. Aaron, oh man, we're getting some tough last names today. Aaron Lazinski, I believe. Yes. Roma Dunze or Jalen Warren.
A Dunze for me.
Yeah, I'm going to Dunze as well pretty easily. Jalen Warren's starting to see that role grow a little bit, but like I said, Dunze is the leading receiver for the Bears right now, coming off of another nice game. Peter Petrovich, our friend from Serbia, is asking us on Blue Sky, half PPR, Cade Otton or Jonnu Smith, and then also wondering if you should start Bo Nix or Anthony Richardson. Now, Cade Otton, things do get mucked up a little bit here in Tampa Bay because we're expecting Mike Evans to return. We're expecting Jalen McMillan to return. That could potentially impact Cade Otton and the usage that we have seen for him. But looking at my rankings, I have him exactly one spot ahead of Jonnu. So I've got him really, really close, but I'm going to lean towards Cade Otton. What about you, Jagger?
I have K Dotton at a tight end 5, and that's just it's more about the Giants and less about the situation in Tampa Bay because I understand Mike Evans coming back.
Now, here's another good one: Bo Nix or Anthony Richardson. And again, I've got these guys back to back in my rankings. Peter, I understand why you are stressing over these decisions because I too have both of these guys extremely close. Do you prefer Nix or Richardson this week?
I have Knicks. I've faded Anthony Richardson because Detroit has been
Detroit's tough.
tough. Yeah, they've been tough. So if he can throw the ball well and accurate, then he can have a big game. But the running game, Detroit's just shut down for most teams.
Yeah, so I have Knicks one spot ahead of Richardson, and it's also because of the matchup. What I will say though is last week, I'm sure you watched the game, Jagger. Shane Steichen finally built a game plan around Anthony Richardson's skill sets. And I don't know why he wasn't doing this early in the season. Like last week,
Mhm.
we finally saw just like, hey, let's start the game off. It was a lot of just screens and slants. Let's get these short, easy throws that are going to get Richardson in a rhythm. And then once he started hitting those, then you can see that the game slowed down for him and he started playing better. And then it opens up the deep shots downfield that he was able to hit. They had a lot of designed runs for him, something that we didn't see early in the year as well. So I I was very confused by the early season game planning because we saw Shane Steichen do this with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. We assumed he was going to do the same thing in Indianapolis and then didn't for whatever reason. But if we continue to see game plans like we saw last week, expect a lot more 30 plus point performances from Anthony Richardson down the stretch.
Yeah, I undersold him in a dynasty league, and I'm sad. So
I just bought Anthony Richardson in a dynasty league yesterday. Anthony Richardson for first and Evan Ingram, and I'm currently in
that's
second
it.
place. Yeah, I'm currently in second place too. So
So
I
that's
actually
super
I
flex,
got
right?
it is super flex, and I got Cam Akers added. Needed a little extra boost. I'm a contender, currently in second place, and don't even really need quarterback help. I've been plugging in Jameis Winston as my QB2, but so the guy in last place put Anthony Richardson on the trade block and threw out Anthony Richardson and Cam Akers and for a first and Evan Ingram, and was pretty happy to pull that one off. So
Mhm.
um, have that be what you need to hear to go out and send some trade offers for Anthony Richardson in your dynasty leagues if he's going for a late first right now.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm excited for the future for Anthony Richardson. I think that little 3-week timeout that they put him on seemed to help. Got a next question here coming from Blue Sky from the Hebrew Jammer, and he is saying pick one: Jacoby Myers at Denver, which we already talked about, getting that shadow from Surtain. Jalen Warren at Cleveland, which is going to be a sloppy, wet outdoor game. Christian Watson versus San Francisco, or Roshan Johnson versus Minnesota. We could only pick one here, Jagger. Who are you going? Jacoby Myers,
Christian Wat
Jalen Warren, Christian Watson, Roshan Johnson.
Christian Watson. I think he has the same floor as all the rest of these guys, and he has a higher ceiling than all the rest of the guys. So
No notes. That's exactly what I was going to say. Last question here. White CDN Rabbit on Blue Sky is saying, really struggling with the QB decision this week. I got Justin Herbert going against Baltimore on Monday Night Football or Kyler Murray versus Seattle. This is 4-point passing touchdown. Jagger, between Justin Herbert, who has been red hot, and Kyler Murray coming off the bye week, but had a huge game before the bye. Who do you prefer here?
Kyler Murray, I have him one spot ahead. I do have him back to back, but one spot ahead, and that is just rushing floor. That is the decider for me.
Which, hey man, Justin Herbert, he's been rushing a fair amount these last few games. But yeah, I
Fair.
got Kyler Murray as my QB3. Justin Herbert is my QB6, so I'm gonna prefer him. And Jagger, before we sign off, we got one last question in here from Joey Wright saying this question is for Jagger. Why is today's show the second best start sit show you will be on this week? Now's your time to plug that show that you guys do on Sunday morning. Let's hear all about it.
Oh, it's because Joey Wright's not here. Me, him, and Jeff and Adam Hutchinson, and then one random guest that Joey brings on. We do the Start Sit show every Sunday. I'll be answering a lot of these questions again. I'll be tilting with the rest of you as those injury reports come in. So come check us out right here.
Definitely check it out. It's a great show. YouTube.com/@footballguysfantasy. Jagger, Joey, Jeff do that every Sunday morning. As a reminder, I will be back Friday morning on an audio only episode that I do with Jeff Bell. We usually go for about an hour and a half. We look at every single matchup. We discuss all the injuries, news, notes, rumors, and everything else you need to know to get prepped for your week of fantasy football. And then Alfredo Brown will be back next week. We'll be doing Monday waivers as always, as we get ready for a fun Thanksgiving week. Lots of early football coming next week. Want to thank y'all for tuning in, and we will see you next week.